everybody. My name is Emily Rae, and I am so excited to be talking to you about building author websites today. Websites are one of those tricky things that are kind of a necessary evil, so I'm so excited to be here to give a rundown of why you need one, or really who needs one, along with what they should look like, what needs to go on it, the flow of it, and then the technical aspects of everything, the fun part. But first, I'm gonna start with an introduction. I am an adult speculative fiction writer. So I know what it's like to have limited time, and the time that you do have, you wanna sit down and you wanna write. You wanna have fun, you wanna let your creativity out through writing and not building a website. So I know it can be kind of stressful. I know what that feels like when you want to sit down and write, but instead you have to focus on something like a website, marketing, that sort of thing. So I get it. I'm with you. I'm also the owner of Jet Creative, which is a marketing firm where we do video production, graphic design, marketing strategies, ads, things like that. And of course, websites. So I've done hundreds of websites for multiple different businesses, different industries, from pizza shops, construction companies, to websites like author websites, which are a little bit of a different beast. So I've kind of have the full gambit of marketing and websites. I'm also the digital marketing manager at Writing Mastery, where we do a lot of graphics and ads and fun things like that. And I also own the Writer's Site, which is a company that is specific to building author websites. And again, it's because I am a writer and I know what it's like I know what it's like to be an author and a writer at the same time. So I wanted to just put my specialties together and then help other authors build websites. So that's what the Writer's Site's goal is to do. So why are websites important? So they are a first impression, and it's a way for you to showcase yourself and your books. It's how an agent can get to know you and how fans can reach out to you. And it's the first step in selling books and selling yourself as a professional writer. And you're in control of it. Unlike social media, where the algorithms can change, it cannot show yourself to people. You could put everything you want on your website, whether it's a newsletter or a blog. It is yours in complete control. And you just want to have that online presence. And a website is a great way to do that. So the question comes down to, who needs one? I know there's a lot of people who are querying, or you're going to be self-published, indie published, or trad pub. So there is, like, who really needs a website and at what stage? So if you are a querying writer, so you're still writing your first draft, or you are going to start querying agents, or you are querying agents because you're going down the trad pub route, I'm going to say that you don't necessarily need to rush into getting a website. Focus on writing your first book first, and then you can kind of think about getting the website going, just because it's hard to think about two things at once. But I will say, if you do want to start and you know you want to be published, that it doesn't hurt to set one up and set the foundation. Because once you are published, you're going to need a website to help you sell your book and add legitimacy. So even when you are querying, I have heard some feedback of people saying that agents have gone and looked and saw that they had a website during the querying phase. So it's not like it's a make or break kind of thing when it comes to having a website. Like, an agent's not going to necessarily reject you because you don't have a website, but it does add legitimacy. It does show that you are serious, you're taking this seriously, and that you aren't just writing your book, you're thinking about your whole career in mind. And as a professional author, you have to think about your career as opposed to just the books that you're producing. And this is also something specifically that my own agent has told me, that it was just nice to go and see that you have an online presence through your website, through your social media, that you are just taking this whole thing seriously. You are just really trying to do all the right steps. And then once you do get published, you have a website already established, already set up. So why is it so important to establish a brand and a platform? Well, according to Publishers Weekly, 2.3 million books were self-published in 2021, and 500,000 to 1 million books were traditionally published, which is a lot of books. And you are literally one in nearly 3 million there. And you need a way to stand out. So if you don't have a online website presence or social media or someone just putting your book and your name out there, there's no way that people are going to find you. It could be the best book ever written, but if no one finds you, no one knows it exists, then it's never going to get read. It's never going to get recognized. So you just need to have a way out there today in the digital age, having an online presence. So let's talk first about self-publishing, because I know self-publishing and traditional publishing are a little bit different. So if you're self-publishing, you are the only one that's promoting your books. It is all on your shoulders. Sure, you could reach out to other influencers or other people to help you, but that's still on you. And even if you want someone else to help you, you're going to need to be legitimate. So you want to make sure that you have that legitimacy and that professionalism when you're self-publishing. And so traditional publishing, you might think, well, I want to get a traditional publishing deal. They'll help me market my book. They'll help me get out there, which is true to an extent. All publishers, though, handle marketing differently. A lot of them don't do as much as maybe some people think once you get that traditional book deal. So media companies are experiencing a die-off. So a lot of TradPub would use their platform to market through magazines or newspapers, which aren't really a popular thing anymore. They're all digital. And those digital companies are now going to reference your website, your social media, that sort of thing. So you want to make sure you have that. TradPub also has less support for marketing now. There's not as many people working at traditional publishers, which means that a lot of it still lands on your shoulders. There's staff shortages at presses. So you just have to keep in mind that having traditional publishing marketing help you is good, but at the same time, no one can really sell yourself or your books more than yourself, because no one really knows it more than yourself. So you have to think about you're working hand in hand with these publishers to get your book out there. They're going to help with distribution, but you need to help show yourself and show your book off. So whether you're self-pub or TradPub, it's important to have a website and online presence. So just long story short, promoting yourself and having an online presence will help you get books in front of people, which is vital for selling books, whether you have outside help or not. So you just don't want to say, once I get my book out there, once I hit publish, whether it's self-publishing or an indie publisher or a TradPub, you just have to let people know that you and your book exists. All right, so putting that all why you need a website behind us, we're going to talk about the website itself. So we'll start with kind of the fun side, which is branding. So what is branding? You might hear it a lot, oh, my brand, I need to protect my brand, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to break it down a little bit more. So your brand needs to serve a purpose, which is representing you and your books. It also needs to position you in front of the right audience. And it also needs to show off your personality. So show off who you are, because people do like to connect to other people. So if your website is fun and goofy, then they're going to know that's who you are. If it's romantic, then it kind of shows it off that way. And we're going to dive into that a little bit more. But first, I want you to think, who is your target audience? So just take a second and imagine your ideal reader. Their age, their personality type, the things they like, just who is that? And you don't want to say everybody. That's the wrong answer, because like a kid's book isn't the same as a horror book. So you just imagine your target audience and keep that in mind. So let's talk about author vibes, which is, like I said before, like kind of the personality of your brand. So what is your genre? This is something you do kind of want to nail down, and I know I'm a writer who writes in multiple different genres, but overall, think about what your genre is. And so an example of this is Stephen King. When you look at all of his books, they're all just kind of back to back. They all have a certain vibe to them. You can look at it and just know that it's horror through the fonts, the colors, the spooky imagery. If you're a horror fan, you'll walk into a bookstore and a cover like this is going to catch your eye, because that is going to be the vibe of the book, the vibe of the story. That's what you're looking for. On the other hand, this is Dr. Seuss, a very different vibe. So very colorful, the fonts are more playful, more cartoony, and that's going to attract a kid more than a horror fan. So keep your ideal reader in mind when you're thinking about what vibes you want your website to be. Would they like colorful? Would they like whimsical, or maybe a softer romantic tone? If it's fantasy, maybe more something that's ethereal or forest nature vibes. Just kind of keep your ideal reader in mind and what would attract them to you and your books. And it should be sort of a symbiotic relationship type of thing where it's you are similar to your book genre. So then think about your fonts, your colors, your vibes, everything, and do a little bit of research and see what other people are doing. So are they, look up other children's authors and look up other young adults and fantasy and horror and see what their vibes are, and you can kind of reference them. Don't copy them, but you could take inspiration from what their brand is like while adding your own personality to it. From there, you could pick different templates, different fonts, images, that sort of thing that match your vibe. And we're gonna go into a little bit more of that later. And that brings us to building out your website. This is the sort of fun, nitty-gritty part of it where it's like, what do you put on your website? There's so much information about yourself out there. What do you want? Or you might be saying, there's not a lot of information I could put out there. I haven't published a book. What do I even put on a website? So we're gonna be going over that now. What goes on it if you're unpublished? Well, you're going to have an author bio. No matter what, you're going to want to have a little bit about yourself. And I'll go over what exactly should go in an author bio in the next few slides. You'll want to mention your books, because I know a lot of times when you're querying, you might be querying one book. If an agent likes it, they might want to know exactly what you're doing next. What other things do you have? And if they can go on your website and see that you have, 2 other books that you've written in the same genre that also sound interesting, it can just give you a little bump up that you wouldn't have before, because then it'll be like, oh, they have other books in store. This is they are taking their career seriously, and I could see a forward momentum path. And so it's just kind of good to lay out your books. It's good to have an author photo, just because a lot of people like to put faces to the names. You could always have a sketch if you don't want to put your face right on your website. You can get an artist to draw a photo of you or something like that, just to have a little bit of a face to the name. You could put a blog on it, where you could, that's a whole other conversation in itself. You could have a bunch of other thoughts, opinions. You could talk about your writing journey, and just getting your thoughts out there is never a bad thing, especially when it comes to SEO, which dives into the technical side of things a little bit more. But SEO is search engine optimization, which will help people find you and your website. And a blog is really helpful for that. You could put some short stories on there, just kind of like, here's a few of little samplings of things that I write, just so people can get a little more information about your style and your tastes. With the little disclaimer that once you post short stories on your website, you usually can't submit them to other lit mags, so be selective on what you put on your website. But if you do have some short stories that are published, those would be great to put on your website. You definitely want to put any social media links on there so people can follow you. Social media it's a whole other video in itself, but it's great to have that constant update, that you keep potential readers and agents and everyone just updated on what you're working on. Contact info, so your email address, and then newsletter signups, which again is a whole other different video, but a newsletter is just very important to have on your website. If you can keep it updated, I will say that you don't have people sign up and then you don't send people out to send a newsletter out to people. But it's just one of those things where if you have a newsletter, whether it's through Substack or MailChimp or anything like that, it's another one of those things where you're in control of it, unlike social media. So you're in control of who sees it. Everyone you send it out to is going to see it, unlike on social media where the algorithm will show it to like 10% of your followers. So a newsletter is something to really keep in mind when you are building out your website. You want to try to have a newsletter if you think you can keep up with it. But again, we're writers. We'd rather, maybe would rather write books more than blogs and newsletter signups. So I will say that you don't want to take on too much. You still want to make writing your focus, but doing these things is just kind of like a icing on the cake sort of thing. These aren't requirements. You don't have to do all these things. They're just ideas, so you don't have a blank page. But you definitely want a bio, some of your books, and your contact information on a website. And it could just be a simple single-page website, nothing too fancy, just to show that you exist and you have a website now that exists and is ready to grow. So once you grow and you get published, you can add a book trailer. You can add your book covers and blurbs. And then, of course, the most important thing is links to buy your books. So if people want to buy your books, they could easily just go to your website and links to go buy them off Barnes & Noble or wherever they're for sale. And then if you're ever unsure of what can and can't go on your website, I would say just ask your agent or editor, because sometimes there's some rules about what you can share and what can't be shared and things like that. But yeah, so that is, in general, not everything you have to include, but some things you can include. And it could be a robust multi-page website, or it could be a tiny single-page website, whatever you'd like. But I don't think you need to go too wild with having a huge website, especially if you're just starting out. Some bio tips, because I know it can be hard to write a bio, is you do want to keep it brief, just like 1 to 2 paragraphs, no more than 150 words. You don't need to have your whole life story laid out. You definitely want to highlight any publications, so if you've published any books or short stories, or even if you don't have any of those, you can mention your works in progress. If you want any contests, those are the things you want to make sure you put in your bio. Or if you have a job that requires some writing, or that you can implement your job into your book that you're currently writing, you could put that in there. You definitely want to state your genre to let readers know what you write, and the age group too, including the achievements, if you won any awards, you were on any bestseller lists, that sort of thing. And I would say you could show off your personality a little bit, like a fun fact or a detail. You don't want it to be too casual to look unprofessional, but you could say if you have a fun hobby, or if you like to go on hikes with your dogs, or things like that. Just kind of like to remind people that you are a human, because that human-to-human connection is something that seems to be kind of rare nowadays. So you can just add yourself into your bio a little bit. Then if you have any relevant experience, like if you're an editor or a teacher and things like that, you can add that into your bio. And then as for the flow of how you want to put your information out, you want to put the most important information first. So if you're not published, you're going to start with your bio and author headshot, because right now you're the most important thing. Then you put the books that you're working on, any additional info like blogs or short stories, and then your socials and contact information. But if you are published, you want to lead with the book, because that's what you're trying to sell. So the books, the covers, and links to buy them is where you want to start with. And then your author and photo, and then additional information and socials and contact information. And it's not necessarily set in stone. It doesn't have to be that way, but when you're trying to sell your book, you don't want people to have to try to search for the links and figure out how to buy them. And just here are some examples of websites that I've built. The first website here is an example of a multiple page website. You could see that both of them start with photos and bios of the author, because they're not published just yet. It has a little bio, underneath has some credentials, and the blog, and then their book. Look at their branding. So if you look at these two authors, you can kind of see from the start what kind of books they write. Ellie Leonard writes women's fiction, so her branding's a little more simple, It's not the colors aren't too crazy, the font's not too in your face. It's very kind of straightforward. Juniper Klein, she does have a book coming out, but there's no necessarily links yet or a cover yet. So you could even have it look like that if you don't have a book that's published yet. You could just say, hey, it's coming soon. Here's a little bit about it. And then you could put a contact form, links to your social media, and this is just kind of like a bit of a snapshot of how it can look. And then Juniper Klein writes YA fantasy, and hers is a little bit more creative with the juniper berries playing off of her name, some colors, things like that, that might tune a little bit more to a fantasy style. Here's some examples of authors who do have books coming out. So you'll see with like Adrienne Riviera here on the right, the first thing is her book, a blurb of her book, and then where to buy it. And then her bio. And that's just a single page, very simple website. And sometimes that's all you need just to get the point across. It doesn't have to be anything extensive. And then Adrienne Riviera writes YA romance, YA like kind of fantasy romance. You could tell by her cover that it's just very kind of fun and whimsical. And so her branding looks similar to that brand. You'll go to her website, you'll see it's colorful and pink with watercolors, and you'll instantly know that her book's going to be kind of more of a fun ride as opposed to like a serious horror book like Stephen King's brand is. And then on the left, we have Marie Jolly's website, which again leads with her book, and then down to her author bio, newsletter signups, and then her Instagram feed. So you could even do things like implement your Instagram feed right into that. Marie Jolly writes shapeshifter romance, so that's why she has a lot of more like natural elements in it, because it deals with a lot of like animals and natural themes, and then taking the kind of more natural colors. And then Ron Walter's website right here, you have the books right at the top, links to buy them right away, and then his author bio, along with other pages to get a little more in depth of his books, things like that. You could take a look at this website and just see that right away, but the colors and the fonts, it looks like a children's writer. And then say you're not a novelist, you write short stories. This is a website that I built for someone who just writes short stories, and you can see there's a list right on his homepage of all of his publications. And you can click on them, go and read them, and it just shows off, it's like kind of like an archive of everything that he's written. And then again, looking at the branding, it does look like it does fit his style of writing, his stories. So when you go to his website, even visually, you know the kind of thing that you're going to read when you go and read his stories. Okay, so let's dive deep into the technical stuff of how to build it. This is where I know a lot of people can get kind of hung up with building a website, because it can be a lot. It can be kind of stressful to just break all that down. So how to make one. There's a lot of options of website builders that are sometimes free with some limitations. So you can use Wix, Squarespace, Canva, WordPress. There's a lot out there. Another option is to hire someone. As I mentioned before, the writer site, which is writerwebsitedesign.com, that's how I build websites for people. So there's two different options there. But let's start with the build it yourself route. So Wix, Squarespace, and Canva. The pros are they're easy, cheap, and the templates are nice. I mean, it's built for people to build a quick website. Though, they are a little bit inflexible, because sometimes you're stuck in a template. If you want to build out something that's a little more different, it could be tough to do that in a template. It still takes time and creative energy, and I know when you don't have a lot of time, it could still take a while. And the free versions do have things like yourname.wix.com domain. So it would be emilyrae.wix.com, which is okay, but eventually you'd want to get your own domain name, which would be, mine is like byemilyrae.com, and then it's more straightforward. You could do something like WordPress, which I like to consider is like the next step up from something like Wix. It's more customizable. There's multiple plugins that you could do whatever you want, so you're not stuck in a template. And it's popular, so it's really easy to find things like different templates and how-to guides and things like that. The cons are the hosting gets a little more complicated. When you get a website on Wix, your website's hosted through Wix. So you have to like choose a host, whether that's Bluehost, GoDaddy, and then you have to pay for that, which can be anywhere between $200 to $300 a year. It does require more design knowledge to use something like WordPress, and it requires some coding knowledge as well sometimes, depending on how you're setting it up. And again, it takes time and creative energy, as everything seems to. The other option then is to hire someone. The pros are that it's easy. You could just hand off everything you need to someone and then they'll build it for you and then you have a website. So that makes it not as time consuming and hopefully less stressful, just because it could be a lot of work and stress to figure out things like hosting and design and brand and all that sort of thing. And it's done professionally because it's done right. The cons is, of course, the cost. Because it can be hard to find the right person to do it. And the wrong person can then build it and they could build it wrong. It could be uneditable, so then you can't go in and even edit something as simple as your bio. So you have to make sure you find the right person. And then what do I mean by it's done right? So you want to make sure the hosting is set up correctly. If it's not, then your website won't show, and then you have to figure out why it won't show. And there's so many weird little connections that you have to do in the back end to get hosting and domain to line up that it's too much to go into in this little webinar. So other than the hosting, you want to make sure that you have security on your site. You want to make sure the SSL certificate is set up, that you don't have any sort of holes that malware can get in, that sort of thing. You want to make sure that it's mobile friendly, especially in this day and age. Everyone's looking at websites on their phone more than desktop. So you want to make sure that when someone's scrolling through it, it makes sense, it looks, everything's laid out correctly. You also want to make sure that it's set up to Google standards for SEO, which one of those things is it has to be mobile friendly. Google doesn't like things when things aren't mobile friendly. But also, it just looks at things like hierarchy and design. A website that's messy, doesn't have great design, doesn't have great hierarchy with the right code tags, things like that, Google will penalize and it won't have you show up in SEO as much. And if you're not thinking of it as if you're not thinking of it like that when you're building it, which it's a lot to think of, then it won't be set up correctly in the back end. Along with just having your SEO set up correctly with keywords, connecting your social media account, setting it up with Google Analytics, things like that. All the stuff in the back end that might be tough if you're doing it yourself through something like Wix. And along with, you want to make sure you have that professional design that suits you. It is good to have a little bit of an idea of what brand you want, what vibe you want when you hand it off to a professional web designer. But you want to make sure that that comes across professionally, well, being what you creatively have in your head. Because if you're not necessarily a graphic designer or a web designer, you don't know how to set that up effectively. If you want to take a look at some more website examples, you could look at my website, writingwebsitedesign.com, or follow me on Instagram. If you do need help with a website, take a look at my website. It has everything that breaks down the hosting, the domain names, what you get, what I help you with, and the price. I try to keep the prices as low as possible because I know what it's like to be an author who just needs a single page website. And if you remember, hosting can be $200 to $300 a year on its own, but I cover that cost. So you're just paying for the design, you're not paying for the hosting. So you're cutting out that whole other cost if you go through the writer's website. So just something to think about if you're looking for a website. There's a contact form on there too. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about it. So you could go to my website, check it out, byemilyrae.com, or you could follow me on Instagram, TikTok, or X at by_EmilyRae. You could feel free to send me an email at emily@byemilyrae.com. And again, my business website is writerwebsitedesign.com. So if you have any questions, please just reach out. I know websites can seem like a big beast, but they don't have to be. They could be something small, simple, and you could just put something up without worrying too much about it, overthinking it too much. So please, if you have any questions, you can email me, go to my website, fill out the form. I would love to help. And I hope this helped give you a little bit more clarity of what you're looking for and what you need to do when you're diving into the website process.